I've played The Sinking City 2 for 18 hours now, and this is the second best survival horror game of 2026. The stakes are high for this survival horror title, developed by a small indie team in the middle of a war-torn country, coming out during a packed season full of other great-looking games. The Sinking City 2 has got to punch above its weight. The question is, does it, or is this a Resident Evil copycat that manages to capture none of the magic that makes that storied series so special? If you're one of the 12 people that played the first Sinking City, you'll immediately realize this is an entirely different sequel. And fortunately, I was one of the 12 that played the first game. It's one of my favorite underrated and overlooked gems. It had flaws, no doubt, but it was special and unique. The problem is, it was a niche title that appeals to a very specific group, gamers that love detective games, and that's a lot less gamers in comparison to those that love survival horror. So developer Frogwares had an important decision to make: continue making detective games they love and be forced to downscale their team, or keep everyone on board and shoot for the stars in a more marketable video game genre. They chose the more difficult and risky option in hopes that it pays off. So, is this rookie attempt at a survival horror game worth it?
I don't know. Excellent argument. Approved.
You play as an occult adventurer named Calvin Rafferty, who's made his living hunting down cursed items and forbidden lore that call upon the eldritch gods. Him and his lover Faye get in a bit too deep trying to reach the otherworldly realm known as the Dreamlands, and of course, when messing with the occult, something goes horribly wrong. Calvin wakes up in their apartment with no memory of what occurred, with Faye locked in a supernatural sleep, and the world around him crumbling, now invaded with beings that carry an infection called the Slither, and his hometown of Arkham sinking. With the city being evacuated and overrun by zombified occultic creatures, Calvin sets out with his girlfriend in tow attached to his hip, her essence inside of a ritualistic mask while her body remains dormant. It's a unique setup for a good survival horror story. What could possibly make someone stick around in a city overrun by monsters? Well, someone that's trying to bring the love of their life back to the land of the living, and the only answers are here, where the horrors began. The biggest difference you'll immediately notice just a few minutes into this sequel is the improvement to combat. Easily the first game's biggest weakness has been significantly overhauled to keep up with the likes of other survival horror counterparts like Resident Evil and Silent Hill 2. If you like the slow and methodical, yet precise and thoughtful combat of these kinds of survival horror games, I'm happy to say you're going to feel right at home here. This is no Resident Evil Requiem, but it's also no slouch. And quite frankly, it would make absolutely zero sense if this everyman who's interested in occult rituals had the combat prowess of a veteran secret agent that takes on superpowered bioweaponized freaks like it's an inconvenience. And that's where the combat works really well here in The Sinking City 2. It feels appropriate. Calvin is just a regular dude that's trying to save his lady, so he's not parrying missiles or backflipping and hitting dudes with John Wick combos. He's barely scraping by, taking on these monstrosities all alone. But if that isn't the true essence of survival horror, right? The combat is solid. It's not amazing, but it's good. The over-the-shoulder shooting feels precise, while just shaky enough to give off the feeling that maybe Calvin's had some target practice, but he's no professional. And there's a decent arsenal at your disposal as well, along with some really good upgrades for your weapons if you're willing to go off the beaten path, and these upgrades are legitimately worth it, and I loved that. For example, you can find an axe head for your shotgun, where directly after a shot, if you hit the melee button instead of the normal wimpy hit, he'll swing down hard like he's chopping wood for one powerful melee blow. My favorite upgrade I found was a stock for my rifle that when you aim down sights and zero in for about 2 seconds, time slows to a crawl and you can nail a perfect shot. It feels really good, and slow-mo in video games is awesome 60% of the time, every time. Not only is there a melee that you can use to stun enemies a bit to give you some space, there's a dead space stomp, ladies and gentlemen. Again, something in a survival horror game that's just immensely satisfying. One of the core mechanics to combat here is the weak points. You see, the Slither inhabit bodies as a host, and there's points on an enemy where you can see the Slither, and instead of just going for that squishy off switch, it makes the most sense to wait and see where a collection of Slither are going to bunch up, and the weak point will appear on their bodies, and you'll want to focus all of your fire on that one spot for the most damage. It's a fun take on something like limb dismemberment in Dead Space, where you don't just, shoot for the head every single time. You have to shoot at different spots, and it breaks things up and it makes combat a little bit more tactical. What isn't as fun though is that these zombie type enemies are what you will probably be fighting 85% of the time. There are other enemy types like these smaller jumpy little guys, these dudes that spit red fireballs out of their faces, these terrifying sea monster looking guys, and these big boys. But that's it, really. The enemy variety is lacking and does get a little tired. But again, that's a small thing. And there are a few boss fights that I won't spoil, and I will say that the major boss fights of the game are good. I really liked them. There's just not enough. I could have used at least 2 more big boss fights, but the ones we get are very good survival horror boss encounters. The Sinking City 2 also features that classic survival horror level design, the interconnected and confined hallways that double back on themselves and twist and turn. You gotta solve puzzles and uncover clues in order to progress through a locked door, or a overly convoluted puzzle that makes absolutely no sense in the best ways possible, because what sane person would make this in their work office, and why? But it's here, and it's fun in the most video gamey way. The level design is great. Navigating through these corridors and levels is one giant puzzle in and of itself, and even when I got a little lost or didn't know exactly what to do next, I was never frustrated because I knew the answer was there. I just wasn't looking hard enough, or I missed something right under my nose that would lead me to whatever object I needed to open this severed face scanner to get into the next wing of the hospital. Calvin isn't a detective like Charles Reed was in the first one, but there's still investigative work that you'll need to do if you want to make it through these labyrinthian levels, and all of that is organized on your investigation wall. This operates kind of like Saga's investigation wall in Alan Wake 2, where you'll find clues, notes, newspaper articles, things written on a chalkboard, numbers that open a safe. I thoroughly enjoyed exploring these different locations and piecing all of this together to get through these meticulously designed areas, or finding the last piece of the puzzle that would get me to where I was trying to go. I also mostly enjoyed the story. It was a breath of fresh air, in my opinion, to have a pretty straightforward narrative. I feel like survival horror games can get super over-convoluted with their stories because so much has to happen to form these unbelievable situations. But this is a straight-up love story about 2 people that are willing to do anything to stay together even when the consequences of their love become morally questionable. There's obviously a lot of unbelievable stuff going on around Calvin and Faye, but their characters are believable and feel grounded. Their motivations are clear, and for the most part, the story sticks the landing when it does come time to wrap it all up. This story will stick with me likely more than any other Resident Evil or Dead Space story. And maybe I'm just a sucker for love, but the exploration of what would you do for the person that you love the most is certainly not a new concept, but it hit hard here. And I cared for Calvin and Faye's tale, even if I didn't agree with their decisions. I genuinely wanted to see them reunite and truly be back together again. I won't spoil the ending, obviously, but I really liked it, and I think it'll drum up some great online conversation about everything that happens. There were also a handful of pretty strong support characters that didn't get nearly enough screen time. All of the side characters were taken away as fast as they were introduced, but oddly enough, made most of their very limited screen time, and I wish there was a lot more character development here because they were treated like useless pawns but made enough of an impact to make me wish we got more of them. And you just don't hardly get any time with these characters, which is another thing the first game excelled in, because since it was more of a semi-open world game with dialogue choices, you got to know these interesting characters that filled this game world. Frogwares is very good at writing interesting side characters, and they did that again here, but you will barely spend time with anyone else outside of Calvin and Faye, and it seems like a missed opportunity, at least to me, someone that loves great character performances. Ultimately though, The Sinking City 2 is a very solid survival horror title that isn't as good as Resident Evil, Dead Space, or Silent Hill 2, but absolutely deserves to be played by any fan of the genre.